very important for us to understand why. This is our course on the Roman Republic. Let's begin.
"2,000 years ago, a Roman poet named Juvenal sat down and wrote about a city where the rent was too high, the streets were impossible to get through, the buildings were death traps, the politicians were bought, and the people were too distracted by entertainment to notice any of it." He wasn't writing a warning about the future. He was complaining about his Tuesday. And the reason his words have survived every century since is not because they are beautiful, though some of them are. It's because you will read them and feel a quiet, unsettling certainty that he is describing your city, your newsfeed, your landlord, and your government right now. This video is going to walk you through 5 problems that Rome had in the 1st century that the modern world is still dealing with today. By the end, you won't just know more about ancient history. You'll understand something about the present that most people spend their whole lives not noticing. Start with the housing. In 1st century Rome, a city that had swelled to roughly 1 million people, the demand for housing so far outpaced the supply that landlords did whatever they wanted. Most Romans lived in buildings called insulae, which were apartment blocks that could rise 6 or 7 stories high. They were built as cheaply as possible, with thin walls and almost no structural foundation, because the faster a landlord could fill them, the faster the money came in. Juvenal, writing in his 3rd satire around 100 AD, described the experience of renting in Rome in terms that require almost no translation for a modern reader. A first-class house, he wrote, could be bought outright in a small country town for the price of 1 year's rent in Rome for what he called a shabby, ill-lit attic. The gap between what people paid and what they got was not an accident or a market correction that hadn't happened yet. It was the product of landlords who faced no meaningful legal consequences for what they built or how they charged for it. Tenants rented month to month with no protections. Evictions were immediate. The buildings regularly caught fire or collapsed entirely, killing everyone inside, and the landlord would simply build another one and start again. What made this worse was that the city's growth had been so rapid and so unplanned that there was physically no room left to build outward. The streets of Rome were already narrow before the population exploded. When 1 million people needed to be housed on a footprint that hadn't expanded to match them, the only direction was up. Emperors tried to address this in the way governments tend to address housing crises, by passing regulations after the damage was already done. Augustus capped building heights at 70 feet. Later emperors lowered it to 60. The buildings that had already been built didn't suddenly become safe, and the underlying economics that had made slumlord construction profitable in the first place hadn't changed at all. The rules addressed the symptom. The incentive remained. Now consider the traffic. Julius Caesar, who died in 44 BC, passed a law banning wheeled carts from the streets of Rome during daylight hours, because the congestion had become completely unmanageable. Rome's streets were not designed for a city of that size. They were narrow, uneven, constantly crowded, and functionally impassable for large parts of the day. Caesar's solution, which sounds reasonable until you think about it for a moment, was to push all freight deliveries to the night. Every cart carrying grain, wine, construction materials, and goods of every kind was banned from moving through the city until after dark. This meant that the people of Rome, already living in thin-walled apartment blocks stacked on top of shops and taverns, were now trying to sleep through iron wheels grinding across stone cobblestones until sunrise. Juvenal wrote that the noise of wagons moving through narrow streets at night would break the sleep of a deaf man. He wrote that insomnia was killing people. Martial, another Roman satirist writing around the same time, complained that only the wealthy, those with homes set apart on quiet hills, could afford to sleep through the night. The connection between money and silence is not a new observation. It is almost 2,000 years old and in print. The daytime streets were no better. Juvenal described being pressed by enormous crowds, smashed by beams being carried through the city, hit by barrels swinging off carts, covered in mud, and having his feet crushed by soldiers' boots. He described navigating the city as an exercise in survival rather than transportation. The Roman government did eventually try one-way traffic systems in some areas, evidence of which has been found archaeologically in Pompeii, where ruts in the stone roads and painted directional markings on walls indicate deliberate traffic flow management. It helped the way one-way streets help now, which is to say it helped a little, and the fundamental problem of too many people trying to use the same roads continued regardless. Underneath both of those problems, the housing and the traffic, sat a much older and more persistent one: the concentration of land and wealth in the hands of a very small number of people. In the centuries leading up to the fall of the Roman Republic, Roman aristocrats and senators used their political connections to acquire enormous agricultural estates called latifundia. These estates were worked largely by slaves captured in Rome's military campaigns, which meant they could undercut the prices of smaller farms run by free Roman citizens. Those citizens, unable to compete, sold their land and moved to Rome looking for work. This accelerated the very population growth that was making the city unlivable. The wealth gap between the Roman elite and the average Roman citizen was not a gradual drift. Historians who have studied this period describe it as one of the most severe concentrations of land ownership in the ancient world. By the 1st century BC, a relatively small number of aristocratic families effectively controlled most of the agricultural land in Italy. The Gracchi brothers, Tiberius and Gaius, attempted land reform in the 130s and 120s BC, trying to redistribute public land that had been illegally occupied by the wealthy. Both were killed for it. The land stayed where it was. This is where the politics enter, and where the story gets particularly uncomfortable to read from a modern chair. The Roman system, both during the Republic and the Empire, ran on patronage. Wealthy men funded political careers. Political careers rewarded wealthy backers. Senators accumulated fortunes not through their official salaries, which were not enormous, but through the deals and appointments and contracts that flowed from their positions. Cicero, one of Rome's most celebrated lawyers and orators, wrote extensively about corruption in the Roman courts, which he described as routine and largely unpunished. Governors sent to administer Roman provinces routinely extracted enormous personal wealth from those territories, which was illegal in theory and standard practice in fact. The Roman poet Sallust argued in the 1st century BC that the Roman ruling class had abandoned any real concern for the public good and governed entirely in its own interest. He said this not as a radical accusation but as a straightforward description of what he had watched happening for his entire adult life. The gap between what Roman political institutions were supposed to do and what they actually did had grown wide enough that most ordinary Romans had stopped believing the system worked for them at all. Which brings us to the last problem, and the most recognizable one. Juvenal, in his 10th satire, wrote that the Roman people had once elected leaders, commanded armies, and decided the fate of the empire through their votes. By his time, he said, they had given all of that up. They no longer cared about any of it. All they anxiously hoped for, he wrote, were two things: bread and circuses. Panem et circenses. Free grain and free entertainment. The Roman state provided both. Every Roman citizen was entitled to a grain allotment through a program called the annona. Free admission to the Circus Maximus and the Flavian Amphitheater, which could hold somewhere between 50,000 and 80,000 people depending on the event, meant that spectacle was always available and always crowded. Emperors competed with each other to fund more spectacular games. The appetite for entertainment was enormous, and the political class had learned that feeding it was more effective than actually governing. Juvenal was not celebrating this arrangement. He was disgusted by it. His point was that the people had traded real political power for comfort and distraction, and that the people doing the trading didn't even understand what they were giving away. The phrase he coined as a criticism has survived 2,000 years, traveled through every language that has discussed power and politics since, and remained in active use because the dynamic he was describing has not changed in any fundamental way. People are still kept comfortable enough not to ask difficult questions. Entertainment is still more widely consumed than civic participation. The systems for doing this have become considerably more sophisticated. The principle is identical. 5 problems. Unaffordable housing built fast and cheap by landlords who faced no real accountability. A transportation system overwhelmed by a city that outgrew its own infrastructure. Extreme concentration of wealth driven by the advantages that power provides to those who already have it. Institutional corruption normalized to the point where it no longer surprised anyone. And a population pacified by entertainment and distraction at precisely the moment its engagement was most needed. Rome had all 5 of these simultaneously for well over a century before the Republic fell and the Empire replaced it. The most striking thing about reading Juvenal and Martial and Cicero today is not that they sound ancient. It's that they don't sound ancient at all. It's that you have to keep reminding yourself they are not writing about now. If you want to keep watching, there are more videos on this channel that go exactly this deep. Subscribe so you don't miss them, and share this one with someone who needs to see it.